Alright, what's going on today, guys? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my takes for the top 5 best incantations in Elden Ring. Keep in mind with these tier ranking videos that it comes down to personal preference for the most part. And all bosses referenced in this video were all just on standard new game. I went ahead and made a new build for this video. Let's get things started with the number 5 spot. Starting things off at number 5, we're going to be taking a look at Golden Vow and its counterpart, Flame Grant Me Strength. I just feel like for any build, that these are just completely necessary just to make your build that much more potent, especially Golden Vow because it just increases damage across the board, whereas Flame Grant Me Strength increases physical damage and fire damage. So it goes really well with Blood Flame Blade, where you can use that on your standard weapons or weapons like Bloodhound's Fang. So I guess in a sense this kind of makes this a 3-for-1 part of the video. And with all 3 of these incantations sitting at a relatively low faith cost, with Golden Vow being the highest at just 25, the faith investment is very low, so it makes it really easy to slot them into any of your builds. Of course, you guys can go ahead and just use the faith tier just to get to 15 faith, and then pop the physic to increase your faith by 10 to meet the Golden Vow requirements in the buffing routine before your boss fights. But what I really think makes these incantations accessible to anyone is that they're just ground loot. They're not locked behind a boss or anything like that. With Golden Vow being found at the Corpse Stench Shack in Mount Gelmir, with Flame Grant Me Strength found beside Fort Gale in Caelid, and then also Blood Flame Blade being found from a Teardrop Scarab in Liurnia. So all of them just really easy to grab. And I would highly recommend slotting any of these into your builds, especially the melee ones, as I mentioned previous, because that's where this combination is really going to shine. Well, that's going to do it for these 3 incantations. Let's go ahead and proceed forward to the number 4 spot. Moving things along at number 4, we're going to be taking a look at Unendurable Frenzy. This one here is just going to be the Comet Azure of incantations, for lack of better words. So all you really want to do is just drink that Cerulean Hidden tier and just spam down the bosses. It does have built-in stagger damage, so if you get that nice stagger there, it just makes it even easier for more movier bosses like the Tree Sentinels here to kind of take them out real quick. One of the few drawbacks of this incantation, as you guys just saw, it does proc that madness after a while if you hold it down. So just make sure you're using an armor set that kind of lowers your madness a little bit, so that way it doesn't build up nearly as fast. It also is very, very mana heavy, so make sure you're using a big FP bar, or as I mentioned at the start of this fight, just use the Cerulean tier for that unlimited mana. Sitting at a relatively low faith requirement of just 31, you guys can grab this from a chest in the Yellow Annex Ruins in the Consecrated Snowfield way late game. Waiting for it is pretty worth it in my opinion though, because it does have a very high DPS, but at the same time I couldn't really put it any higher just due to the madness buildup and also the really heavy mana requirement that it can have. But that's going to be Unendurable Frenzy at number 4. Let's go ahead and move forward to the number 3 spot. Coming in at the number 3 spot, this is going to be Lightning Spear. This is my go-to incantation for taking down bosses like Malekith who are really weak to lightning damage, or also just clearing hordes of enemies in any dungeon. I feel like this is just my go-to incantation, especially for the range that you can use with it, because you don't even need to get close to the enemies and then you can kind of take them out without having to worry about taking damage. Talking about the incantation itself, it's super buffable. Things with like the Lightning Scorpion Charm to increase your lightning damage, or also the Lightning Tier for the physic as well. It also can be used with the Godfrey icon because it is a chargeable incantation, so if you have the time to just charge it up, the Godfrey icon will increase this thing's damage. Bosses like Malekith, however, where they're really unpredictable and really movie, you don't really have time to charge it, but just the standard damage, as you guys can see with the gameplay, is definitely usable. And speaking of buffs to this incantation, it is worth mentioning that if you use your Gravelstone Steel to cast, or even use it in your offhand like I'm doing with this gameplay, it does boost the lightning's damage by a little bit. You guys can grab that from a knight in Lane Dell, real easy. And speaking of where to get things, you can also grab Lightning Spear from a knight in Liurnia, kind of by where Randy's tower is. You just got to take him out and he'll give you the prayer book. And just take the prayer book to the favorite dog Muriel and he'll teach it to you real easy. This thing sits at just a relatively low cost of 17 faith, so it's really accessible to any build once again. And since Malekith here was determined to do everything he could to be really movie and dodgy and waste a lot of my time, I'm going to burn a little bit of that time by mentioning that all incantations in this video were casted with the Phlox Canvas Talisman equipped. You can get this from Gowry after completing Millicent's questline or killing her when she moves to the Halig Tree. I would highly recommend just completing the questline because you get the Winged Sword insignia. But anyway, once you complete it, you'll get that talisman and it greatly raises incantations by 8% damage. All in all, I definitely feel like Lightning Spear is an underrated incantation, kind of overshadowed by its larger counterparts like Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, spoiler alert, or even just the regular Lightning Strike. However, at the same time, I definitely feel like this one here has some niche uses, especially against bosses like Malekith or just clearing regular dungeons. So that's going to be Lightning Spear at number 3. Let's go ahead and move forward to the number 2 spot.
To kill what?
As you guys probably guessed, coming into the number 2 spot, we're going to be taking a look at Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, where this thing really shines against those larger enemies that don't really move around a whole lot. Sitting at a hilariously low cost of only 26 faith. I have no idea how they got decided on that, whereas things like Common Azure sit at, well above 60 int or whatever. It's kind of funny, but anyway, you guys can get this one as ground loot in Fair Missoula right before you get to Godskin Duo, and once again, just take that prayer book and turn it into Doggo Muriel, and he'll teach it to you. And due to this weapon's raw power output, I thought showcasing it against just one boss, especially with it really being a short clip, would be kind of anticlimactic, so we're going to go ahead and do a couple more dragons with it. Moving forward and how to buff it, obviously with your Lightning Scorpion Charm and then the Lightning Tier in the Physic once again. People do say that this can be amplified with the Godfrey icon because it is a chargeable incantation. However, with numerous testing, I found that this doesn't really work, but if you guys have different opinions of that, make sure to let me know in the comments. Well, with 2 casts, see, he just can't take it and he goes down. He does manage to get me with the rot, however, which is kind of funny, but I just decided to leave it in anyway. So obviously when you're casting this thing, you're going to want to be as close to your target as possible, and if anything, directly underneath them. So it kind of pairs well with something like Assassin's Gambit, where you can get really close to your target without them detecting you. I have no idea how this didn't work in this example here, and he manages to clip me. But that's okay, I just thought it was worth mentioning. But with early game dragons like Agil, they just cannot take this whatsoever, and I managed to actually get a nice little one-shot with that incantation right there. So that's going to be Dragon Strike at number 2. Let's go ahead and move to number 1. Alright, coming in at the number 1 spot, this is going to be Catch Flame. Yes, you read and heard me correctly. I do believe that the starting incantation you get as a default on the Prophet class is the best in the game, and let me tell you why. So starting off with buffs, you got the Fire Scorpion Charm for increased fire damage, you got the Fire Tier for increased fire damage, you got Flame Grant Me Strength for increased fire damage, and also you can use Golden Vow to stack all that across the board. You can see with the gameplay here, things like late game avatars can't even take it, granted that they're weak to fire damage, but it can do some serious work and it comes out really quickly. Another way this one really shines is the relatively low mana cost to damage output. As you guys can see with my bar up there, I use just under half of my mana bar. But as with the dragons, I thought with this one too, we'd go ahead and do a couple more bosses just to kind of show you guys that this thing is really, really good damage output wise. I know it's another Erdtree avatar, but I just wanted to showcase how good this thing could be against them. Don't worry, with the next boss, he's going to be something completely different from what we're seeing here. Well, you guys saw there, just only a few casts and they go down with absolutely no problem. I would say the only downside to this incantation is that you have to be directly right in the enemy's face to cast it, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of range. However, as quickly as it comes out and the DPS that it can do, it's still usable regardless. Now, taking a look at the final boss here, we're going to be doing Gideon. That's right. We all know how spammy he can be with some of his spells. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing with Catch Flame and make it so he can barely even move. And as the gameplay shows, with your smaller targets, you can kind of get them into a stun lock animation. So you can basically just lock them out of their unpredictable movements. So that way the smaller, spammier bosses, you can kind of just use this and it makes it for a kind of scripted-ish fight. But that's going to be Catch Flame at number 1. Now, before you guys disagree, I highly recommend you guys give this a try for yourselves. But that's going to be today's video. As always, I appreciate you guys coming out, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you.